you. I'm happy with that.
Okay.
Well, yeah, well, welcome. Thank you so much for taking time out of your schedule to join us this afternoon.
Well, thank you. Thank you all. I, uh, I'm very happy to be here. Bien
Awesome.
content là. Bien content avec nous. Salut, honnête, tout le monde.
Yes, indeed. Merci en pile.
Nous
And
content de recevoir vous.
Merci. Bon, moi, si ça a bien marché. OK, voilà.
okay, fantastic. So, we do this every Thursday, right? The name of our Zoom sessions is called Bayyinah and Friends. So every week, Bayyinah invites somebody onto the program and just has a conversation about, who the person is and, what the person has been up to lately and stuff like that. So in this particular session, we did put together a little bit of a slideshow. I know I emailed you and said you're probably not going to do a slideshow, but we did find some things that we have that we would like to share with you and get your input on, if that's okay.
D'accord.
All right, fantastic. So I'm going to share my screen. Right. Okay, I'm not sure if you saw this flyer.
Yes, I did. Thank you.
I think the first one I sent you, I misspelled your name by accident, but this
Oh,
I got it right. So, so welcome. So, Ma, do you want to start us off?
Fine. Yes, I will.
Okay.
Nan nou tout ancêtres qui te créé, qui te gourmet, qui te bâti, lutte pour peuple noir pas péri. Nan nou tout si la yo qui te choisi à joindre l'an mort, lè yo pat ka wè ki jan pou yo te rete sou route liberté. Mwen salue tout zami, Bayyinah and Friends, après-midi. In the name of those ancestors who created, who built, who fought, so African children will not be erased on our planet Earth. In the name of those who chose to rush up to death rather than live without freedom, I greet you, all the friends and supporters of Bayyinah and Friends. Our guest today is Edwidge Danticat. How do I view her? During all the times our paths have crossed, I only picked up two vital energies from her: freedom and simplicity. Therefore, when I look at her, I see Marie-Claire Heureuse Félicité Bonheur as a dominant ancestor in her. Today, we'll have the opportunity to toque la paoli, which means another way of saying talk in our language, toque la paoli, with her, and therefore confirm or correct the vibrations we picked up. In the name of Fondation Félicité, all the FF volunteers, a number of your admirers who emailed me, I say to you, Edwidge Danticat, welcome to Bayyinah and Friends. Please greet your fans.
Well, thank you. Merci en pile. Bayyinah, c'est un honneur pour moi joindre avec vous. It's an honor to be with you. The first time we met, I remember, was at a gathering for young women in Port-au-Prince. And I remember when you got up to speak about our like the matriarchal line of our ancestry, and these were young, very young women, and they were mesmerized. And then the conversation continued with the project you were doing on the other end of the spectrum with elders, people who had reached 100 years. So I've been following your work, and it's an honor to be with you. All right. It said I was muted by my host. Donc, merci en pile pour l'invitation. Merci pour tout le monde qui a regardé. Merci pour le travail. And thank you for having me. But I'm not sure which language we're supposed to speak, but or if it's like a mix of both or.
We speak English,
Okay.
but it doesn't mean that our tongue cannot just step out.
Okay,
you know?
All right.
So
we'll do it like at the dinner tables at home.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Before going into our Troquet la Paoli talk, allow me to read this poem, which is a definition of the concept of freedom handed over to us nearly 5,000 years ago by our Ethiopian philosopher ancestor, Amun Hotep. So you see, you guys got lucky. You get to hear it a second time. Our first mistake, I'm sorry, the title is Freedom. See, it's not freedom, it's freedom, question mark. Our first mistake was that we thought of freedom as a place rather than a continuation of a struggle. Tyranny never sleeps. That's a paragraph by itself. Tyranny never sleeps. Our second mistake was that we thought freedom as a goal rather than a launching pad from which to reach our goals. New paragraph. Without purpose, freedom hardly matters. So if you have no purpose, watch out. Our third mistake was that we thought freedom made us free. That, however, is license, not freedom at all. Freedom is being shackled to identity, purpose, and direction, and being in constant pursuit. The person who is free is in constant pursuit. So I would like for us to look at what did you, in what you heard from this poem, what has touched you, what has grabbed you, what is important, what would you, in fact, I meant to send it to you, I'm sorry.
Oh, it's okay. I was
meant to send it to you beforehand.
I should have memorized it just now. But I think the freedom is in constant pursuit. And the parts of the poem that also define freedom. I remember when I was writing a book called The Farming of Bones, one of the characters said maybe something that's antithesis, like the freedom is a passing thing. Someone can always come and take it away. And maybe that's the sort of, because this was coming from people who had just had their freedom, what they thought was their freedom, taken away. But I think it follows in a similar line, that it is a constant pursuit, and the sense that, like, freedom, I think when people think of freedom, they think of it as sort of solely as a group activity, that we're all going to march to freedom, or we're all going, but the as a fiction writer, as there's someone who writes stories too, I think of how people on the way to that freedom as a group, like the individual freedom, like the sense of freedom that you must have within yourself in order to be even able to participate in a larger freedom, like freedom movements or groups, like moving forward as a group towards freedom. This idea that I think freedom is stagnant, I think our ancestors knew was not, like, that it wasn't like you're going to get to freedom and you're going to just sit there in freedom, right? And because there are all these sources that, as you know, that would like you to be re-enslaved. And I think, and even after our freedom, right, in 1804, so much of the effort was to keep that freedom. So much of the effort is still to keep that freedom. So for me, that's it's a really powerful notion. I would love to hear what you've probably spoken on it all before, but what is for you the gist of that? What brings you
Well,
back back to this
I,
poem?
yes, in fact, this is a text that I've been reading for the past 30 some odd years. I put it as part of all my classes, all my university classes. I have made the French and the Haitian translation, use it in literacy. So I think it's a text that is absolutely extremely powerful. Number one, what fascinates me is the very title, Freedom. That means this is not an author that comes to tell you. This is an author that invites you to question. And to me, that's number one. You know, let's talk about this thing, freedom. What is it? Okay. So then the second thing that I love to stress is as tyranny never sleeps.
Sleeps. Yeah, ain't that the truth?
Tyranny is forever at work.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
That's the truth. That's the truth.
yeah.
So if you go to bed, you go to sleep free, and he was not sleeping while you were.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a notion to me that is so important for us to capture. Tyranny never sleeps. Tyranny takes no vacation. Tyranny takes no breaks. Tyranny
Yeah.
doesn't get this and that. It's constantly at work.
Mm-hmm.
Um, the second error, tells us that we thought of freedom as a goal. So when I reach this, I will be free. No, rather than thinking about it as the launching pad from which to reach your goals. So freedom is that strength, that force that enables you to jump and catch what you want, but it's
Mm-hmm.
not what you get. See,
Mm-hmm.
some of us say, well, you know, I can't stand this life. I gotta be married. Once I'm married, I'll be happy. I gotta have a job. Once I have a job, I'll be fine. I gotta. That's not freedom.
Mm-hmm.
Freedom is that continuously you have a purpose, but the purpose is never the finality
Mm-hmm.
if you are free.
Mm-hmm.
And then, of course, I love the conclusion. Freedom is being shackled to identity. And that to me, there is no 1, 2, 3 ways about it. Being shackled to identity, purpose, and direction. So you need 3 things constantly in your life: identity, purpose, direction, if you want to be more or less in the way to freedom, on the way to freedom. That's roughly how
Yeah.
I
I mean,
see this. But
it's
this is
very,
something we have spent in some of the classroom. We spent 3 hours talking. Go ahead.
no, I was gonna say it's very powerful that the counterpoints of that with the tyranny never sleeping, right? Because we're seeing, like in today's news, for example, like here in the United States, how, you know, even the coronavirus is not stopping tyranny. If anything, it's like reinforcing certain kinds of, it's kind of tyranny. But I've always been, I think, this idea of um, it's a thing that I
Sorry,
think
I'm
about
missing some of this.
in terms of this idea of freedom as a quest, right? And I think because, for example, if we think of enslaved people who wanted to be free, they wanted to be free. They wanted their, like in Haiti, we wanted to be free. We wanted our country to be free. How does, and I know I'm flipping a little bit the script there, but how do you envision, like, next generations and that vision of freedom, right? Because I think in more consumer directed society, it's like freedom is a big house, it's a nice car, I think. But how do those of us, it's like, I think so many of us now in this community, in the diaspora community, we've lost people in this moment, and and sort of like it's important now, I think, for us to reconfigure what our ideal of success or even health or freedom is. And so for me, because I'm at home with two young girls, and I feel like I want to infuse as much as I can in them. And part of that would be this idea of like, what is that kind of freedom of self, freedom as a community? What does that mean for the next generation in your view? Because I'm here to learn as well. I think as everybody, how do you see us like using this moment in terms of teaching freedom to the next generation?
Well, the first thing that I usually talk to my students about is that, first of all, freedom is a force within. You have to awaken it within yourself, and then it can guide you, and it can establish all the rules and regulations as to how you will lead your life and what you will give of importance and what you won't in your life. So you have and with freedom, everything else will be at a place, because freedom is the very base. Even people talk about accomplishing your mission is what will lead you there. So if you've never thought about what is freedom to you, it's very difficult for you to go ahead, even with personal objectives. And if you don't have a strong view about freedom and personally, then you cannot join any group and work for the freedom of that group. Okay? So to me, one of the lessons that were destroyed by many of the people who wrote about our street, they did not show us the personal growth that these various ancestors, women and men, what they went through to become free themselves, and then to join in together to bring us to freedom, even the ones that didn't know what freedom was. Because unless the group develop a strong thing together, but for us to have a strong thing, we each have to have a very strong perception of freedom within. So the next step for us is absolutely to teach, train, condition, do whatever we have to do, so enough of us become aware of freedom. And freedom from our own perspective. Not, as soon as you say freedom, somebody says democracy, and they say les droits de l'homme, and then they say 18 whatever something. Hey, no. Freedom is older than this. You are older than that. And you've been debating about freedom so much longer. We're debating a text here that was there 5,000 years ago in Ethiopia. So freedom is we have a long story with freedom. And we must reclaim this that we have. And then when it's part of everybody's conversation, I look at Sister Marimba Ani in Atlanta. The main thing for her, the main topic is sovereignty. And it's vital. If you don't have freedom, you can begin to think about sovereignty. You can begin to think about self-sufficiency in food. You can begin to think of, there is a sickness, what are the medicines that I have right in my environment to deal with it? You can't do that if you're not free. So freedom is vital. And freedom has to be the number one element in all curriculum. That's what I say. Mm-hmm. And if we can do this, kindergarten must Kindergarten children must know what freedom is. Primary school, secondary school, university. Freedom must be part of the conversation through and through. And those who don't go to school, then yes, when dealing with the merchant, like yesterday, we had somebody come and repair the gate here. And so he worked and the rain started, he worked through the rain, did a lot of, and accomplished a lot of his work. My first reaction was to say, oh yeah, but he'll finish tomorrow. Tomorrow is like the painting and different, but the work was done. And I was very impressed with his work. And I automatically wanted to pay him. But then I also know my society. I pay him, I might not see him for another week.
That's
instead
also
of coming
society.
back tomorrow morning.
That's also here.
Well,
yes.
You have to know where you are. Exactly. Yes, absolutely. So it really hurt me because the way I saw him working through the rain, I wanted to pay him. But at the same time, I knew I could make a big mistake if I did. So in the end, I said, no, I reasoned it. And I said, no, thank you very much, brother. So we'll see you tomorrow at 9 to finish it up. And sure enough, tomorrow at 9, this morning at 9, he was here. By 10:30, work was finished. And he got his money and a little bit more for being under the rain. So we have to think things through and see how to handle them. We can't let emotion just guide the decisions that we take. We have to take the emotion and then put it and balance it out with all the other stuff. So he seemed to be someone whose freedom, his personal freedom, is higher than the average from the little bit of conversation we had today. Maybe if we had it yesterday, I might have paid him yesterday. But not having known that yesterday, I was right to hold on.
Well,
So
I think,
freedom,
it's
every part of everything. Go ahead.
Well, I think
please.
I'm trying to, even anecdotally, like this anecdote that you talked about. So like for me, in the artistic space, we try to explore all the shades of thing. Like if I were to write that story and I wrote it from the point of view of that man, for example, like that would be an interesting point of view for me. Like who does he have at home? What didn't happen yesterday? And what can happen today? Like, because he didn't get picked. Like, so there's all these, I think that's kind of like the freedom that that the artistic work allows, right? That you can step into the shoes of different people, and in a way you have to step out of yourself.
Things.
You have to step out of yourself, because like you're telling that story and I'm thinking, I know you, and I don't know him, but I was like, oh, that's the story I would want to, like, I would want to know what he was thinking and what he would say to this encounter. And I think that is what is missing in a lot of our historical narratives, right? Because the people we get, and that's what I really like about your approach to history, because in historical narratives, the people we get come fully formed, they're perfect, they're, or if we get a little bit of their frailty, it's so that it can reinforce their greatness later. And forget the women, like the erasure of the women is, it's so, sometimes it's in relation to the man, or, so I think.
Forget the women, forget the civilians, forget the elders.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's why, for example, like in like the Charpentier novel, where it's from the view of this just like ordinary man that he steps into, who's watching this build, but he also knows some of the history. But I think that's the thing. That's where I think that's where art and history in a way can collaborate, in the sense that we take, because the history that I'm drawn to in my artistic work, like, is the gaps in history, like the stories we don't know, like you're saying, the individual person, and how that relates to the larger picture. So I feel like that's probably, where our, our interests, like this work merges in terms of taking these big notions like freedom and trying to see what was that like for one man at the gate, one woman inside, like what was, like, you all might become great friends later. Like, what would that be as you go along? And so that the art, so like the writing tries to take like the seed of something and broaden it with, in a historical context with a lot of research, but to try to get deeper into like that story of this one person in the middle of this big historical context. And I agree, we don't get that of our, like of our great heroes. I mean, there's some novels, but we get a lot of mythology in a way. We don't get their process. We don't fully get the process to how they became who they are, which I think your work helps a lot.
Yeah. Let's move on, please. Would you share with us your most recent memory as a child in Haiti?
Oh, wow, so many. So, well, I grew up in Bel Air, and when I was, one of my first memories is, oh, you have, you have photos. So I'm going to go through the family slide here. So that's me at 4 there on the little girl. So this is my uncle and aunt who raised me. So my mom and dad, those are not my parents, they're my surrogate parents. My mom and dad moved, my father moved to New York when I was 2. He knew one person in New York, my uncle Justin, who was my mother's brother. And then 2 years later, my mother joined him, and then they left me and my brother with my aunt and uncle, my uncle Joseph and my aunt Denise there. And so these are, with the other pictures, I don't know, some of you, maybe some of the older people have these memories of like having to go take a picture. I have some those are not online, so you couldn't find them front, but of my like annual school picture with my school uniform. So I went to a school near Bel Air called Collège Elliott Pierre, and we had a uniform. I think my cousin might be wearing it with like CEP on our like Porsche, and the kids used to say "Cochon élevé ne Pâques" for the school. They used to make fun of our school. But so that's one of those kids is my brother and my cousin, and we were like the 3 musketeers. And this house were all the kids of people who had traveled abroad. So we were 3 in the picture, but there were a lot of other kids whose parents were in the Dominican Republic working. And so we were all in this house being raised by this couple there, So memories in Haiti, going to school my mom dragging me to school at 3. I learned to read at 3, but it was a painful learning. A lot of, tap sous la même, rulers on the thumb, but I learned to read early. And then when my mom, it was a very summers, my best memories really of summers in Haiti, because around summertime, we would all get packed, like, on sac du riz, on sac maïs, on l'huile, and you're off to La Tournelle, Léogane, which is where I spent most of my summers when I was a kid with my brother and cousins in the countryside. Those were I felt like my best childhood memories, because I was absolutely free out there. You could just run around and then when I was 12, I moved to New York. My parents sent for me, and I lived in New York, and then in Providence, Rhode Island for school, and then now I live in Miami. So, but yeah, it's strange seeing these pictures with everybody. You did your good research, man. So yeah, this is my the student. Yes, I went to, so And for the Brooklynites in the crowd, I went to Clara Barton High School for the health professions in Brooklyn because my parents, like a lot of Haitian parents, wanted me to be a doctor. And when it was like, okay, then you could be a nurse, and it didn't quite work out. But in the process of deciding not to be a nurse, I did a lot of volunteer work, say at Kings County Hospital. I volunteered twice a week in Kings County Hospital, most of the time that I was in high school. So I had a lot of exposure to the health professions and to our people in the hospital. And so this is my graduation picture from college. I went to Barnard College. This is part of Columbia University. And that's my graduation pic when I still had my kind of fro there. All right, so this is actually my second book, but I wrote a lot of that book when I was in college. So my major, because I wanted to, when I decided I wasn't going to go into medicine, I wanted to do like global affairs. Like I had a vague idea, so I majored in French literature and economics. I had like two majors. And so the French literature was kind of learn to like read books. And then the economics was I was going to do business. And then I started writing while I was in college. I started writing the stories that ended up in this book. But my first book was a novel called Breath, Eyes, Memory. And Creek Crack, the title from here was, of course, inspired by being told stories when I was little. I had wonderful storytellers in my life. And they were women who did not read, who were not readers and some not literate, but who were very strong women who love stories. And in my life, the women were also very stern. And I would see them just become, it's like the child in them, like both in the summers in the countryside and also in Port-au-Prince, like the kid in them would come alive when they were telling us stories. So I wanted, this book was really to honor the women in my life who had told me stories, both kind of folktale stories, but also real life stories. And I have to tell you, with these stories, when I was growing up, I didn't quite understand why you were told certain kind of stories, but at different moments in my life, I thought, oh, this is why I was told a story. Like if you're told a story about someone losing a parent, and then your parent dies. Like when my father died, all the stories I was told about fathers dying, or it's just like, oh, this is why I was told a story. And it was and this came back because it was this past week was the 15th anniversary of my father's dying. So I remember just reaching back to all these things that I was told when I was a kid about people who lose their parents, and so that so this book was really a way of honoring this tradition of storytelling. But I have to say, like the great Yves Desjans, who was a good friend to my husband and myself, used to always object to this title. He's like, it's not a question and answer. So, but it was too late to just, he said, it's not creek crack, it's just creek crack. And so he was an amazing linguist and also very precise about certain things. But the question and answer was to make it a bit of a call and response.
Yeah, if I can just squeeze in real quick, Marbella. Well, hi, Edwidge.
Hello.
Yeah, so this is Franz. So we met in DC, as a matter of fact, at the Haitian Ladies brunch.
Yes, yeah.
Yes. In fact, Nadine is in this meeting. So thanks for coming by our booth, and I believe you purchased some books, and I shipped you some books. So
Yeah.
thank you very much for that. But I just wanted to say that I'm from Brooklyn too, born and raised in Brooklyn.
Brooklyn in the house.
Brooklyn in the house. So that's a great fact. I didn't know you lived in Brooklyn as well. But I didn't grow up in Haiti, right? So there were two books that kind of really gave me like a sense of what it was to grow up in Haiti, right? And one of those books was Masters of the Dew, right, by Jacques.
Gouverneur de la Rosée.
Absolutely, yes. And that would really gave a very detailed, behind the curtain look at, you know, peasant life in Haiti, and also Creek Crack, right? Creek Crack was so, like, that book literally probably changed my life, right? The way that the story was told, the way that you wrote it, and it just gave me, like, because my view of IET as a young person, like growing up in New York from Haitian descent, is with your parents not really bringing you to Haiti. Everything you know about IET is from what you see on TV and news, and it's all very positive. I mean, not positive. So just to kind of see the actual story of wildlife, the day-to-day life, you don't really get into, like, in Crick Crack, it's not like the whole history of, you know, revolution and this, that, and the other. It's the average person's life, right, in IET, which really moved me. So, and, you know, the struggles that they deal with, the oppression that they deal with, and how it's just kind of like, this is life and this is how we have to deal with it. So that really opened me up to, like, wow, you know, I didn't know it was like this. And that was sort of like my first introduction. So I appreciate you for that. And I do know that this was your second book, Creek Crack. But I just like the picture.
Oh, I hate it. I have to tell you the story behind the picture. So when the book came out, and thank you so much for all that you said, and when I was writing Creek Crack, I had, like, I think a lot of young people, I had a friend, there was two of us who had this great desire that we're like, we're going back to Haiti right after college, and we taught in the summer program for college students in the US, but there were some also Haitian college students, and we did that a couple of summers, and I was going back and forth back to Haiti a lot during that time, and I think I wanted to sort of document and absorb and really keep those stories, put them in a place for me. But the picture, I just thought, I was like, it's like, I think there was this thing also when you publish a book when you're 24, so much of the press is about, like, oh, you're this pretty young girl who just happened to write a book. And I so fought with my publisher, like, I'm not Janet Jackson, I don't want that picture. But I did, like, and it's not even my shade of skin. But one thing that after a while that I took comfort in, so women kept telling me, they kept saying, I took your book to the beauty shop, because then my cousin was doing these braids for me. So they said, I took your book to the beauty shop to show it to the hairdresser to get my hair done that way. And I ended up reading it in the beauty shop. So I thought at least that cover is doing, this kind of job,
Yeah, absolutely. Like, you look, like, it's a very young you, right?
Yeah, now people ask if that's me, and I have to, like, I don't know.
Okay, I just wanted to interject very quick. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, thank you.
Sorry.
All right. So,
yeah, so that was, I guess, further along. This was actually for the Farming Your Bones. Yeah.
I'm sorry, Ma. Go ahead. Ma Bello?
Thank you.
Yes.
Yes. Edwidge, please. How do you envision your life, your world, 25 years from now?
Oh my goodness. I hope I'm around.
I asked you to make a big jump.
Yes. 25 years. That will hurt me at 75.
Very young.
Very young, yes. I hope I'm
Of course you will be.
okay, I will be. I'll be positive about it. I think, you know, we're living this moment,
Very good.
and I was you know, I was watching the program you had with this, like with the scientists, um, and we're living, and then in your series on sort of building ourselves in this moment, it's such a I've it's like such a strange moment where, because as I've said, like there's so many people I've known who now lost, especially in New York. I think the New York, like the Caribbean, like a friend was telling me the other day that there's probably more Caribbean people have died in the US of Corona than in the Caribbean. And in the community in New York has had a big loss, and I've known some people who've lost their parents, and you know, friends of my parents have died. And so I think it's this moment of like, you know, reflecting. When I think of the future, I feel like you think of the future with greater humility, right? And I think we've all, like, I've always felt a kind of vulnerability about the future, and when you have when you're sort of like I'm 50 with the younger kids, like I had kids later, you're just kind of hoping, you're like, I hope I see certain milestones. And so I envision like the kind of freedom you talk about. That's something I'm constantly working on. And personally, my own freedom involves, like, my shackles would be, and I'm like, I'm being vulnerable in the sense, like, my shackles would be sort of caring less what people think about me, or just, I feel like that would be my ultimate freedom in the sense, and that and it's something that I'm really trying to, like, infuse in my girls, to be like this notion of like fully free within yourself. And I hear that as you get older, it gets easier to be like, you know, not to be like it's kind of like, you know, I think James Baldwin has this saying, like, identity like is like not a garment or something, but which goes on to a little bit what you were saying. But I feel like to have achieved that kind of freedom maybe at 75 that you were talk about, which is something that it's a process, you know, to feel like, to fully feel free within myself, and not even, you know, and to be able to fully model that for my girls, and to have, you know, contributed with my work in other ways, you know, to the world, I guess. You can see that it's ongoing. Yeah, but I do think in this moment that question resonates a lot more, because everyone, I mean, I feel a little bit more mortal, you know, at this particular time. You know, you feel a little bit more vulnerable. You worry more about the future of the people you love, and about,
Because
you know, the vulnerability of the world in general.
am I coming through? Can you hear?
I can hear you, but I can't see you. But how about you? You probably, maybe you've talked about this already. Where do you see in 25 years? Did we miss her?
Where is she? We can hear you, Ma. We just can't see you. All right. Sometimes, you know, you get a kind of choppy connection.
Like they're vulnerable. Like,
yeah, but she is there somewhere. I see her mic is still. Oh, there she is.
Oh, okay. Oh, you turned off the camera.
Sometimes the connection is not strong enough to hold.
To do both. Yes. But can you hear us? Can you hear us?
Yes.
Okay, so I would love to hear where do you see in 25 years? I like more broadly, because with all the wisdom in in you, like what do you see ahead for all of us? I think that would be either comforting or really scary. So, but do share.
Yes. You know what? I
Oh,
think may
we've
have
lost her.
her name. All right. Where is she? There she is.
Okay. So
There
I
she's
was
back.
saying that we are the fact that we are facing this disease bring us to a reality. We are more aware that death is part of life. So we can make better plans, more realistic plans about life, knowing that death is always right around the corner and not living an illusion where there is no death. So I think that's the strong point for this time. Now, as far as 25 years from now, if I have my way, first thing I go back to my poem, freedom. What kind of purpose have you set up? If you have set no purpose for 10 years, for 15 years, for 25 years, for 50 years, certainly you won't be there. Because the whole structure of life is that you have to set up purpose. And purpose, freedom gives you the push, and the purpose pulls you towards. So we must always have purpose, freedom, purpose, and direction. They must be together. And as long as we construct, we build on that, then we will be there. In fact, looking at the people 110, 120, 130-year-old people that I've met, these are people, I've never met one who says, well, if I'm here next year. The person is 126 and they said, you know what, 5 years from now, I want to da 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 da. They always have plans.
Yes.
They don't say, if I'm there.
That's probably why they're there.
They're going tomorrow. They have plans.
Yes. Yes, I remember when you made that presentation on the people who were like over 100 at that time, and that was part of what you were saying, that kind of we have to pull that energy forward. But at the same time, I think the balancing, I wrote a book called The Art of Death and I wrote it after my mother died, and it was examining like what different people think about death. And one of the things my mother always said, she always said to us, and then so it's like we're all walking around with our coffins and under our arms, and there is always in life that I think that's a very powerful notion, like that in life there is death. And if we all acted like we were going to, like it was impermanent, that we would do better, like if we
absolutely if we were more aware that death is part of life, then our behavior on a daily basis would be better. In fact, Canis Auguste, a man who passed at 126, he said, if people knew that they could live to be 100, 120, they would behave so much better, because they would know there is a time where they cannot run. So if you know that you're going to reach a time where you walk slowly, where you need other people to help you to do this and that, then you're not going to do the things that make people want to run after you. So I thought that was, these are things that we need to be more aware of. But let's try to get 2 or 3 more infos in. What is your favorite writing tools?
Oh, I am very old school still. Paper and pen. And it's really hard to explain that to the young people. Like I would say, so I say to, one time I was doing a talk at a school, and I said to them, like, when I was in high school, I used to type on a typewriter. And sometimes I said I would record my things on a cassette, and they're like, "What's a cassette?" So, but I'm very old school. I still need to have the hand movement, and then have something to come to the computer with. So I do. It's not a fancy pen. It doesn't have to be a fancy pen. I have a lot of notebooks, but I still write in longhand. I just feel like that motion is a more natural motion for inspiration than just kind of than the typing. Like because I feel like the typing is so, like I have to have something to type when I type. How do you do it? When you write your talks, and how do you write?
Um, I I can write straight from the computer, but if I have to do something serious, something profound, I gotta go get my paper and pen.
Yeah.
It's so somehow the computer is an obstacle if it's a very serious thing, something that I have to deal with.
And I think you can also
What
lie
is
down. Yeah. With a notebook, you can be in different places. You can lie down. I think that also makes it a little more like cozy, especially if it's a long project. Yeah.
That's true. Yes. Now, let's take a peek at the writer. We already there, but have you written any poetry? Am I coming through? Sound?
Oh yeah, now I
Did you
can
hear
hear
it?
you. Yes. I
Okay.
started I think like most young writers, I started out wanting to be a poet. That was like how I started. And I wrote some poetry that, but they just kept getting longer and longer, and I realized they were really stories. But I think most most young poets would be very embarrassed by their early poetry. Like I am a little bit, because it was very, my early poems really didn't have much nuance. It was like very like in your face, if you will. And but I also I've translated some poetry. I used to translate poetry for the Caribbean writer. I translated some René Despeste. I did a little bit of Ida Flaubert. So I really was, because I was majoring in translation. That's one thing I think is so important while we're on that subject. One of the things that I feel is so would be wonderful is to have our young people, in the diaspora, especially in the English-speaking diaspora, since read some of our writers, right, who are Haitian poets or Haitian novelists at the moment. And so that was one of the things that I always wanted to do, to get more translations. That my nephews, for example, my nieces, could read, our writers. And so I did. I started doing those translations because I thought that would be an easy way to do it. And then later on, for example, then the like Haiti Noir and Haiti Noir 2. And then I worked with Carol Coates on a translation of Jacques-Stéphane Alexis, not Compère Général Soleil, but L'Espace de Ciment, which is a really, really powerful, like a kind of a page turner book. I feel like it should be more read.
Absolutely powerful
Yeah, yeah.
book. Yeah. That's true. All right. Uh, does a book has a life of its own? And does the story in the book has a life of its own?
Well, another thing, that I was told a lot by my mother is, it's in Breath Eye's memory, this parole gen pied, parole gen zèle. Words have wings, words have feet. So a book definitely has a life of
Wait.
yeah. I mean, a book has such a bigger life of its own in so many ways. So one way is in the creation. when you're just starting to write the story. You think you're writing something, and then it's just like it can go in a whole other direction, right? The story can just take its own way. So that's part of the life. And I think a lot of writers will say that like the story takes over. And it's in those moments that I feel like you're, you know, any artist is a vessel, right? And the story is coming through. And because there's sometimes things that I write, I'm like, where did that come from? And so, so it has a, you know, the book has a life of its own in the creation process. And then it's like having, it's like, you know, giving birth to a child, and then you're just like, I'm growing you so you can go out in the world. And you know, you find yourself in places. It's kind of like your work has. I was watching this video of you.
And people were, and then we will go home.
Australia, right? And then the
Somebody messed it up.
and then the book has its, you know, it travels. The work travels its own way, and sometimes you have readers you never imagined would see it. So the book has its own life, both in the creation and then after. You know, parole gen pied, parole gen zèle. I think. Yeah.
C'est vrai, c'est vrai. Now, how about the language? Do you have a book in your head and then determine you're going to write it in this language, or do you have the book and then the language is, you know, comes with its language, or you choose a language?
Well, I'm so curious to hear your thoughts about the language too, because language was for me a very dicey conversation. Like when I just started, so, you know, I came to the US at age 12. And for me, in my time, that was just how, so even at Collège Eliot Pierre, which was in a fancy school, you had to like speak French to the teacher, or she would just turn her back. It's like, you know, je ne t'entends pas. And so, and they even kind of monitored you in the playground. So, so that was sort of like, you had the French in school, and we only spoke Creole at home. We were not like a French-speaking household, really. So it was like the Creole at home and the French at school in this really pushy way. And so when I got to the US, I felt like it was like I had been writing in a language I wasn't speaking, and I was speaking a language I wasn't writing, because they weren't, you know, you weren't really writing Creole at that time. So, so when I, you know, came to the English, it was just like we were still speaking Creole at home, and then you're in school. It was like both was, you know, you had school in English. So it was kind of, English became the language that I wrote in, I think, for that reason. And also the first things I wrote,
I'll take care of it, Mama. Go ahead. I'll take care.
So the first things I wrote in English. And it was frankly also, I didn't feel like I could write creatively in French, because my education in French had been like a very academic type of education, which I think, you know, was just very like school language. And even the letters I wrote to my parents in French from Haiti when they were here were very stiff. You know, I saw them afterwards. They were very formulaic. I didn't feel like I could be creative in that. And so I started writing in English. And it was also, frankly, you know, we talked about freedom. It offered this kind of the freedom from my parents looking at my stuff. So it was kind of, it was like a way to hide my thoughts. And it became a kind of a place to just say whatever I wanted to say. And I felt like a kind of freedom within it that allowed me to hide in some way. But language is important, and I speak to people who are Spanish speaking, who are like me, like the same, who came here when they were little from a Spanish speaking country. And we always have, so you're writing this story in English, and the people are supposed to be speaking Creole. And so
they open at 10.
So you're kind of like a United Nations. So you're spontaneously translating, and you're trying to capture in the other language the flavor of your language, right? And for me, and sometimes people see like the Creole in the text, they think, oh, you're trying to be exotic. But for me, I'm always very aware of my reader who is reading the English, but also speaks Creole. So I'm not going to directly translate that Creole word because I'm like, that's boring for this person. So I want to offer them like an alternative poetic translation. So for example, my book that's called The Dew Breaker, which is obviously a wink wink, a salute to Francis' favorite book there, The Masters of the Dew, Gouverneur de la Rosée. So I wanted to call, my book was The Dew Breaker because it's from that expression of Chouquette la Rosée, people who, during the dictatorship, who were killing people basically. So Chouquette la Rosée is the opposite of The Dew Breaker, right? Gouverneur de la Rosée, it's all about like, we're gonna make the rice the rosé. It was such a beautiful and different message than Chouquette la Rosée. So I didn't want to like translate Chouquette la Rosée like the Dew Shaker. So it's just kind of like finding these alternative ways of even though you're writing in another language, but also still incorporating the beauty of your own language. So but I think it's a dilemma that I've also realized I share with so many other people like me who they might be coming from a Spanish speaking country or other country, but that's sort of we're writing in a language that is not ours, but you can in some ways make it yours.
That's where freedom comes in.
Yeah.
If your freedom is high enough, you'll know exactly what to take from where you are and make it say what you want to say from the spirit of where you come from.
Yes.
That's the way I view it.
And also, there's no...
Even though we have many ruling women who did... Go ahead.
Oh, no, I was going to just tag on to that to say that creativity is such a deep space of freedom, because I think you're just connected on so many levels when it's happening. You're connected on a spiritual level, you're connected on this other level with these characters that you're writing about. You're like trying to birth a story. It's very hard to do that without like some sense of freedom in that space, at least, is what I wanted to add.
Very true. And hopefully, if the person can be very, very conscious of the freedom in their work, then they can every only like the author might, but the person, the woman, if it's not conscious, then we cannot step into the different parts of our lives. That's the way I view it. Anyway, let's go on because it's about time for us to open up for our audience. So let me say, even though we have many ruling women who did so with grace and simplicity, it seems to me that Empress Félicité might have been the most simple of all. According to Tante Babette in Commune of Dessalines, the Empress Félicité once said, if one ignores the meaning of the word enough, they will never have anything to share with others. If one ignores the word enough, they will never have anything to share with others. What does that mean to you? And can you make a connection between the ability to share and simplicity?
Wow. I'm thinking, I was like, was the Empress telling us women all the way back then to learn how to say no? But the meaning of, I think it's, well, the counter to that, it's like the expansion. I mean, I can see someone like that, someone like her, who rises to a certain place. There's this one side of it that, I mean, in terms of the word enough, and I'm thinking of it, is it like enough, like assez or pas assez, right? Is it, because when in a context with an extraordinary amount of need, there's never enough, right? And there's always something more you can do. And so that's sort of as the servant, right? The person who serves, the person who gives. But it's that notion, if you, I mean, of tying that to humility, I think it's also true in sort of like it's the balance of realizing scarcity and what we can contribute, at the same time of not like completely killing yourself in that process, right? Because it's the same with you, you know, like I think there are people who want you to be everywhere all the time, right? And how wonderful that you're able to in this time still, you know, contribute and participate in this way. That's very generous. You know, I consider it a great act of generosity on your part also. But I think that's the balance that women who rule, right? Inevitably, there's going to be more asked of us, or women, even women who serve. And I think that's the balance of every day of like of nourishing yourself enough to have enough to give, right? And that goes back to this notion of freedom. And you can be splintered very easily if you don't nourish yourself. But also acknowledging that there's always so much more we can do. There's always so much more we can give, because of this place of scarcity, because of the need. And that's why it's also important, I think, to grow others, right? To invest in others, to uplift others, so that nobody's standing on that big platform alone, or what, you know, so that there's more, you know, like for us to raise up other people to help in this work, because there's never, you know, we're never going to be able to do all that's like asked and expected of us. But if there's more of us, there's just more to take up that work. But I also very much love the idea that from 2 centuries ago, she was like, women, take care of yourselves too. I love that. I mean, that's like one interpretation you can take out of it, but.
Right. Let me do 2 illustrations of the way I understand her saying about talking about enough. Purchased by Michel Petit, a Frenchman. And as a beautiful 20-year-old woman of Spain, because of beauty, it was clear why he purchased her. And the rule was that they have to wait at least 3 nights before bringing her to him. So she was taken and scrubbed by two women, and giving her the instructions. When you go up there, just put this sheet on the ground and don't give a hard time to the master. Lay on your back. And she went into the room and kept herself covered with that sheet. And he asked her, well, don't you know what to do? Yes, I know. But if you want to know the woman who lives here, you will marry me. This is a woman who was just purchased, talking to a man who purchased her. So where is the enough there? Okay, we have to question, where is the enough?
Enough there is a strength, right? And I mean,
absolutely.
I mean, and also, yes, I think
she could look at him in the eye.
Yeah, and then knowing
Okay.
how wrong
Now,
that
the
could have
next,
gone, right?
absolutely, absolutely. You know, that was taking her life in her hands when she spoke that way. Anything could have happened.
Yeah.
It so happened that this man sent her back, said she's crazy, whatever, then called for her a couple nights later and whatnot, and they went through it again. And ultimately, he married her. And she became his wife and a free woman. Now, the next step, he asked her, he's in love with tell me something you want. She says, well, buy my mother for me out of slavery. So he bought her mother. Well, now tell me something else you want. Tell me something. Buy my father for me. So he buys her father. Tell me something, anything in the world. I could buy things for you. You know, you have your mother, you have your dad now. Tell me what you want. She says, enough is enough. I'm free. My mom is free. My dad is free. That is enough. If you want to give something, you give, but there is nothing else in this world I want. We are all free.
Mm.
So, when we look at the concept enough, it will guide us in many, many ways. If we know how to say enough.
Assez, c'est assez.
And I think in terms of we, when I look in terms of today's life and all of us in debts with credit cards left and right, and everybody is, part of the problem, we have not learned to say enough. Even if they give you a credit card that says you're entitled to 5,000, 10,000, whatever, you should set up your own limit and say, okay, fine, this credit card they say it's worth 10,000, I will use it for 2,000 and stop. I will use this one for 500 and stop. I will use, so in everything in your life, give yourself the freedom to establish the limit for whatever. Mm-hmm. That will be a good use of the term assez. And in this, I will say assez to Bayyinah and tell France, now we should open up so all of our friends can be part of the conversation. I know they're waiting.
Yes. Well, thank you for that. I think it's a very good lesson too, as we emerge in different aspects of that. I mean, and in many ways, the society is like pushing people towards that now, with these uncertainties. But I think it goes back to this notion you were talking about, freedom, and a lot of that excess comes from how we want other people to look at us, right? Like, and how much we invest in sort of like people's notions of who we are. So I think that also is something that you want to say, I say to, but that's, I remember the elders always saying, I say, I say, enough is enough, I guess is the but I love that connection, that, I mean, it's so, this is also what's so valuable, I think, about knowing the details of history, like how wonderful is it that we can learn these things from people we know in these other ways, in these kind of mythological ways. But when you learn certain stories, and I think that is a truly powerful stories in terms of like self agency, and so how much we can learn from those, not just about pride and it's Haitian Heritage Month, happy Haitian Heritage Month, everybody, but also about how we can use those lessons of that kind of agency in our own lives. I think that's really a powerful message in terms of how history can guide us day to day,
Oh my God! What in the what?
All right, that can happen on live.
Oh my God. Okay. All right. So let us go on to the questions. All right. Are you ready for some questions at Edwidge?
Yes, sir.
All right. So first question comes from Manolia Charlatan.
Oh, I know her. Hi,
Oh,
Magnolia.
Edwidge,
Sak Pasi.
it's been a long time.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, you got dressed up for us, girl.
You know, I work from home, so I'm always dressed because I'm always on Zoom. So,
All right.
but I owe you a call, Edwidge. I now live in New Orleans, so we have to catch up.
All right.
My question for you is something we've talked about before in some of our interviews and conversations, but I'm thinking about it in the context of the divine. As a writer, as we all mentioned before, you and Mama Bayyinah mentioned, you are a vessel, yes? And so can you talk about the evolution of your own understanding of what's divine happening with you when you get inspired? So I know you've talked about this before in public. People ask you about your inspiration process all the time, but I know you're evolving with your own sort of understanding and the way you want to communicate it, because you're also someone who is very careful because folks take your words very seriously. So I just wanted to see if you had any words to share with us about your understanding of your relationship to divine as someone who's inspired in your role as a vessel.
Well, I think yes, that makes sense. I mean, I've always thought that, you know, there's two ways that stories come to us, right? That often we think we choose a story, but I really think that stories choose us too. And it's part of like that whole mystery of creativity, of inspiration. And part of, I think, like the wonderful thing about it is that we don't know fully where it comes from, right? And it's not something that I'm really interested in, like digging, like and finding. I'm here to receive, and so I think the important thing is to be open to it, right? And to make, for some people, you know, I know people who are like, they light candles or they have to be in a particular place, but I think it's more important to just like be open to different types of stories. And really the most concrete part of that is sitting down and being there. Like I had a friend who would say, you know, I have a divine appointment with my muse, and if I'm not at my desk, I'll miss it that day, you know. And to just like and also to, you have to sometimes, like when I'm working on a story, I'm just like, I'm stuck, and you know, I'm like, come. Like I'll just say come. And you know, if I know some of you have read The Color Purple, so at the end, you know, Alice Walker writes, she thanks the characters for coming. And it's like, she's like, I'm not sure where they came from, but she thanks them for coming. And there is a kind of mystery to creativity that we all don't understand, like why some stories come to some people and why they come to others. So it's not something that I was like, I want to have a scientific investigation of, really. I just want to be there to receive the stories when they come. And to people who are like, if they're writers who are on this chat listening to this, I also think we don't want to make it to like, I am the chosen one, or like, you know, we often don't talk enough about discipline in art. If you sit your butt down, you like work hard at it, something will come, you revise it. There's also this other part to it that's very discipline, you know, that's very discipline oriented, that has a lot of hard work to it. Because I can't tell you how many people I meet, they're like, I have a story that's, you know, that it's gonna make you rich, like, you know. And so, but there are a lot of stories, but part of it, I think we also have to stress, in addition to receiving, because we're not all sitting around receiving stories, that there's a lot of discipline to art. And that if somebody wants to be, and I say this to, like, when I teach to young people all the time, like, if you want to be a classical pianist, even if you're inspired, even if you're gifted, you practice every day. So we also have to incorporate that part of it. Like, if you're devoted to your art, you have to also make space for it in your life. That's very important as well. because we don't want to also mystify too much that it's like I'm here, but that there's also hard work. Like there's a lot of hard work. It's a combination of things.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Okay. So I know you have to go at 3, Edwidge. So I'm going to be considerate of your time. We have like about 5 or 6 questions that we need to get to. So, all right. So next person is Nadine Duplessis Kearns from Haitian.
I know her too. Oh, toute famille là. My goodness.
Yeah.
Hi, Nadine.
Hi, Edwidge. You know, we've met over the years, over 20 years, starting in Boston when I first started just really following you. And I've never asked you this question.
Oh boy.
And that's because even from your first book up until now, I have been collecting all of your books. And so the joke in the family is that I was supposed to pass them on to my daughters. So fast forward, I have 2 boys, now 12 and 16. And the last book they gave me, since they know how much I love reading, was The Art of Death, which I just finished reading a few months ago. But now I'm wondering what you mean to us Haitian women and girls. I have not yet found the writer who is now writing as a Haitian American male author that I could also start saying to my boys, here is a voice that you should have the same sort of like, I don't want to use the word reverence. There is a shelf in my house with all your books. So I do get a lot of kidding from the men in this house about you. But I would love to be able to say, oh, there are these writers coming up that we need to be on the lookout for. We need to support just as much as I support the Haitian American women authors. So I'm wondering, who have you seen? Who should we be? Even if they're writing in short stories and poetry, I'm sure writers come to you all the time asking for you to read their works. Who are we missing out there that's writing from the perspective of a Haitian American men, whether they're like us, Gen X, or maybe there's some millennials or Gen Zs coming up that you've come in contact with? I'm waiting for that.
Okay, we'll start with France.
Well, our coffee table has all of Franz's books as well. I have to say that.
Definitely. I mean, I think, and also especially in the genre that, you know, that France is functioning, it's such a wonderful, you know, mix of like the visual with the graphic and also with the history. And I think this is like a powerhouse collaboration, you know, with France and Bayyinah. It's really amazing. Like funds get to work so her kids can have some books. There's a writer named Dimitri Léger who wrote a book called God Loves Haiti. And if you, there are poets, I think Patrick Sylvain. And so I edited, when I started writing, one of the things that like, I never wanted to be the only one of anything. Like because I feel like that really complicates things because just like, if there's no, like if people don't have other things to read, they're like, oh, they think you're writing some kind of like Bible or something. So when in 2000, I think it's 2001, I edited a book called The Butterfly's Way, which has, you know, like poems and like by Marc Christophe, Guy Pierre has a piece in there. And then most recently, I edited 2 books, Haiti Noir and Haiti Noir 2. And those books, you know, you'll find samples of writers that you can read their short story in the book, and they're classics. Like there's a short story by Jacques Romain, there's one by Jacques-Stéphane Alexis, but there's also Marvin Victor, who's writing in Haiti, but we translated Louis-Philippe d'Alembert, there's some Lionel Touillot. So maybe a lot of the books are translated. There are quite a few translations of Haitian writers in Haiti, and some of them are younger, like Mackenzie Ornell, who has a book called Les Immortels, who was just translated. So you can start with some of the writers, the younger, there's a, James Noel, there's a really good generation of male writers in Haiti whose work is slowly getting translated. I would start with them. And then there's, I'm forgetting, there's a writer who writes YA, his name is, I think, Benjamin, but he's Canadian. And it's like the book is something like the Field Trips Guide, but I'll try to look it up. But I think definitely there's more women, but I would start with the sampling, the Haiti Noir, Haiti Noir 2, and to also, but it'll be interesting to also get your boys to read the Haitian writers who are translated, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because that would be a good introduction. And I'm forgetting the names, but I do get young men who send short stories as well. The women totally outnumber for now, but maybe that's something we definitely have to work on. I think that's a really wonderful question. So if there are male Haitian American, Haitian Canadian writers on this chat, get to it. We need some books for Nadine's boys.
And we will be sure to share them on Haitian Ladies Network as well. We support everyone.
Absolutely. But I know there are a lot of men that I get write self-help books in terms of, there are a lot of books in that genre, people who are writing self-help books as well.
Awesome. All right. Thank you so much, Nadine, for your question. All right. Let's get to the next one. Is Marlene Jean. Do you know Marlene Edwidge?
I probably do.
Hello. Can you hear me?
Yeah. Yes, we can hear you.
Oh, hi, Edwidge. No, you don't know me. No, but I've read your books in my book club, and my daughter read your books in college as well.
Thank you.
She's here with me, listening to you. What a pleasure. Yes. My question actually is about the process of writing, just if you have any tips. I am actually in the process of writing my own book. And I have a specific questions. How do you reconcile your personal feelings sometimes if you're writing about personally how you feel, what your experiences in Haiti versus the main narrative? For example, if you're talking about, women's oppression in Haiti, and as we know, it's still a big issue. How do you reconcile that, writing that? Do you feel like you're betraying the culture, or you just write how you feel?
Well, when I published my first book, I was 24 years old. That was 26 years ago. Mm-hmm. And that book had a great response, but it also had a terrible backlash for that very reason. Mm. And I think part of it is that people, so I would run into Haitian women, and they're like, my white friend read that book and she thinks that happens to all of us, you're making my life really hard at work, or, things like that. So, but we're not alone in getting that. For example, Alice Walker was always, accused of misrepresenting Black men for writing The Color Purple. Mm-hmm. So, and so I think the way to do it, and this is what I learned from my own experience with that, is that you try to write with the most nuance that you can. Mm-hmm. And it always, I think and I've had enough encounters in that way, that every person who will read your book, they'll think like, oh, leave ça pas bon parce que m'pa kon bay ça, m'pa jam tande bay ça, like, and everybody thinks their experience is the Haitian experience sometimes. Like they're like, kote moun sa yo sorti, like, m'pa reconnaître yo. So, but is it what you're writing? Is it fiction or is it?
No, it's nonfiction. It's
okay. So it's your, it's nonfiction. So is it memoir nonfiction or is it more journalistic nonfiction?
It's a memoir, and
it's
a lot about trauma.
Your story. It's right. Your story. So that's very clear. I mean, I think sometimes the most personal thing is the most universal. If you're telling your own story, you tell your story, you tell your truth. I mean, you're not telling everybody's truth. You tell your own story. And the fear that I sense you're having is it's not unusual, because if you're worried, like a lot of people who are not worried about that general side of it, they're worried about what will my mama think? What will my gun think? What will my tante think? So, and all writers share that. You just at some point have to be like, you have to take, prends courage na main, and tell the story, write it as though nobody's gonna read it, write the truest version of it that you can, and then don't censor yourself in the middle of the writing, for sure. Just
I've been doing
write
that.
the
I've been
truest
doing that.
Hmm?
Yeah. I've been doing that, a little bit of that, and this is a book in the making, about 20 years. I've been trying to write it.
Don't censor yourself. Like, we're talking about freedom with Bayyinah. You are the freest now when it's you and this story. Like, that's just like laid bare in this first round. Write it like nobody's gonna read it. That's the freest you can be with it, and then you can edit it later. But sometimes when we stop ourselves from writing something because we're afraid, you can't get to the next thing, because like it's like you have this mountain in front of you. Like, I don't want to climb this, but how are you gonna get to the other side? So I would just strip yourself bare, like write it all and then edit it later on. But but you have to allow yourself to not be afraid.
Thank you very much.
All right, fantastic. Okay, so we have Edwidge for another 15 minutes. So let's start doing our lightning round so everyone can get their questions in.
I'll do my lightning.
Thank you, Edwidge. All right, we have a couple of questions from the chat room that I'm going to get to soon, but now we have a question from Carl Philippe. Carl Philippe, you could go ahead, unmute yourself and ask your question, please.
Yes. It's a general question. Do you ever feel when you're being asked by someone in the media questions about your culture, about Haiti, that somehow there's the expectation that you are the typical representative of a Haitian culture, and whether it's a role that you find comfortable, that you've been able to assume, or whether it's something that's slightly not exactly comfortable. The reason I'm asking is because I've seen it in the media. A lot of times the story's happening, and there's a search almost by journalists for people who can sort of like speak to the story, and sometimes whoever comes first is asked the questions. And so I don't know whether everyone necessarily is typical, but I don't know what's your take on that.
Okay, so I know exactly what you're talking about, because usually the media search is like, whatever is happening, it's like, who is the expert in that? And often when I get those calls, I'll say, I know a really good economist, or I know a really good historian, because I don't feel comfortable in the role as the Haiti expert. Like sometimes I will go on certain things, like if I've written like an op-ed and then they ask, come on the show and talk about your op-ed or a specific thing. But I do a lot of recommending to actual experts, and that's the advantage of being part of at least the community here in Miami. Like, I know who to point people to if they want a specific kind of person. So that's what I do. I don't feel comfortable in the role as the Haiti expert, because I'm not the Haiti expert. And I think it's also, but sometimes what happens though is if like we're like, okay, I'm not going to do it, then it's not one of us, right? So I like it when it's one of us. And I'll guide people as much to the people I know, and so that's always the risk, so.
Absolutely. All right. Thank you, Carl, for the question. All right. Let's go to Francine. Francine, remember this is the lightning round, so we're going to try to go quickly. Thank you. Go ahead, unmute yourself.
Okay, here I am, France. Thank you.
Yes.
My question is around the gift of writing. When did you discover you actually had a gift? It wasn't just a skill you acquired or ideas you had that came together. And how do you, and when you're writing and you're, how does your, what can you say about your gift of how that's working when you're writing?
Well, I think I realized when I was unhappy when I wasn't doing it. And it's the thing that people say about, like, if you want to not work a day in your life, do something you love. And so, and everybody, so I didn't, I feel like it's something I'm always working at. I'm always trying to grow. I'm always trying to get better. But I know that, like, my life would be empty if I weren't writing. Like, it's so for me, it's I guess with in terms of gift, in terms of like feeling like, oh, I could do this, was with Kick Crack, was really once those stories came together, and I feel like it was just like a gift in a way, a gift in the sense that, oh, this was given to me, so I can feel more comfortable to go forward. But whether you feel, I mean, you're not always going to feel like gifted or happy to do your work, but if you feel like, oh, my life is so much worse because I'm not doing this, or I miss the time I'm not doing it and I cannot not do it, that's when you know it's for you. I mean, that's when you know it's part of your path and passion.
Absolutely. All right.
Thank you.
Thank you, Francine. Thank you so much.
Great picture, Francine.
Oh, thanks.
Okay, Andre Lamont, please go ahead and unmute and ask a question.
Hi, Edwidge. My question to you is, what are your thoughts about the connection between healing on a deep soul level and creativity, in particular writing stories, telling stories, and hearing stories? And if you could share a quick story about a quick story that may have brought healing to you.
Oh, it's indispensable. I mean, I feel like stories definitely, like, so for example, there's a book that Scholastic is doing for kids about the power of stories, and my chapter is like stories comfort and heal, because I do completely believe that. So for me, it was right, when I was pregnant with my oldest daughter, who's now 15, my father was dying of lung disease, and my dad, my uncle, who you saw the picture of, who's my second dad, died in immigration custody. His medication was taken away. He was 81 years old. And so after they both died, and I had a baby at home, and I just started writing this book called Brother, I'm Dying, which is what my uncle had said to my dad once when he was almost dying. And so it was like Fue Mapmui. And so I started writing that book, and it was completely very, very healing for me. And also to the I forget your name, who was writing the memoir, that's a plus too that you can get out of writing this, like getting the courage to write it is some kind of healing. So yeah, that book, I would not, and that's the thing too about the power of healing and creativity, is that if there are things that you're called to do in writing, that if you don't do it, you can't go to the next thing, right? So for me, writing that book was so healing, and every day I sat down to write it was like visiting with my uncle and my father, and it was extraordinarily healing, because I was angry, I was grieving, I was nursing a baby. So it was like all these things happening, and that was the one place of where all those things met, was in writing that book.
Oh, that's powerful. Thank you so much. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Andre. Yeah, it could definitely get emotional. It can definitely get emotional when you start putting pen to paper.
Yeah.
All right, let's see, Daphne Bruno. Please go ahead, unmute, ask a question, please.
Ok, bon, bonsoir tout le monde. Et je voulais dire merci à maman Bayyinah et Friends et aussi Edwidge pour le programme ça qui était vraiment aidé mon pile parce que moi-même, moi écrit, moi son écrivain tout bon. Je considère moi comme un écrivain en process ou me dit. Bon, il y a une conversation que nous avons gagnée avant que nous te dit dans la vie dans toute bagage dans la vie faut nous comprendre faut nous gagner compréhension pour nous dire assez c'est assez et m'te vle demander Edwidge l'on a écrit livre en commencement et la fin comment ça a vraiment réalisé dans processus là.
OK. So, je t'avais dit, France, nous allons continuer, maybe jusqu'à 3h30 pour nous joindre tout le monde qui t'a voulu.
OK.
So, pour moi-même, l'aime commencer, parfois, il y a plusieurs gens livres à commencer. Parfois, c'est selon image. Par exemple, l'aime taper écrit Claire of the Sea Light, right? Claire Lumière en main. Je regarde un documentaire sur deux blancs qui adopté un petit moun Haïti et puis il y a les côté dans les États-Unis qui pas gain moun noir et puis une des amis yo t'a dit oh moun sa yo c'est pas même j'avais nous yo pas attaché même gentil moun yo et puis bah ça me fait me fâcher et puis j'ai mal dormi je sois ça et puis me rêver on petit moun qui est l'éclair lumière en main et puis c'est comme ça livre là commencé. Avec ça, inspiration, c'est un bagage. Et puis tout, je me dit avant, c'est discipline, c'est continuer. Et puis, moi, Jean, nous t'a parlé sous ACA, ça tombait dans la partie discipline. Par exemple, est-ce que, en pile, le monde pas réalisé, parce que ça t'est arrivé tout, même là, je fait commencer à écrire, je travaille, et puis je fais, tant que 3 mois, je la caille. Tout le monde te pote petit yo pour me veiller pour yo tout le monde te comme si li la caille li va pas rien so dans un moment ça son gens pour dire assez tout right like pour qu'à limiter tant que temps pour qu'à faire temps pour au moins pour prendre si c'est 1 heure temps 2 heures temps 3 heures temps parce que donc dans un moment ça va dire assez à le monde pour qu'à entrer dans ce que tu vas faire et puis avec l'histoire tout, il y a des moments faut histoire sortir dans mais faut râler pour dire assez c'est dans la direction ça me veut aller ou bien quitter l'aller. Donc quoi c'est son gens nous tout ça toute leçon ça est entrer dans créativité tout dans le sens de discipline pour chita chaque jour pour faire travail là, discipline pour gagner rigueur là et puis discipline pour l'elle fini ça sont parti mon pas jamais parler pour éditer right pour so écrire parce que des fois ça arrive ma pile mon mon demande li bagalia OK ça dit li ça pour moi et puis l'envoyer en critique by mon c'est comme si like au journal mais ça fait partie tout dans ça éditer réviser tout ça donc tout ça c'est ça tombé dans partie création du commencement à la fin. And sorry for those who didn't understand. I think it'll be too long to translate. But we were talking about the creative process and, starting. And she was saying how that might incorporate to this idea of like enough is enough. And I'm saying enough, taking the time to do your right, saying enough to like distractions and having some discipline. That's a quick summary.
Merci un peu.
Merci pour la question.
Asante sana.
Yes, Ma. Did you want to add something, Ma?
Merci. Asante sana.
Okay. All right. So let's go to the next one is Rebecca. Rebecca Valmont, please unmute yourself and ask a question.
Hi everybody. My question is like, how do you get over your inner critic as a writer? You're writing and you're like, oh my God, what are people gonna think of this? Or like feedback that you may get and that makes you feel self-conscious about your writing. Like, how do you get get over that and just feel confident to just put it out there?
Well, I want to tell you, Rebecca, that never goes away. You still always have that. The only thing that's different when you've done it a while, you feel like, oh, at least I can, like, I know, like, the world's not gonna, like, it's not gonna be as bad as I think. But the way you do it is, initially you write it like nobody's gonna read it. You write it, to go back to, to Bayyinah's, but you write it in total freedom. You write it as, just for you. And I think that's the key, to just like write it in complete freedom. And then I always worry, I try to be I make the creative part of it, the creation part of it, censor free. I'm gonna write raw, I'm gonna write everything, and then worry about maybe editing. But the initial writing you want to do in complete freedom. And you say to yourself, I don't have to show this to anybody. I don't have to publish it. I don't have to do, because if you're suppressing this thing you really want to write, you're not going to get past it to write the next thing you need to write. So you just have to completely be free, raw, I'm going to write it. Nobody has to read it, and then worry about the rest later. But, and there's, that's this, I was given this advice very early and it's helped me a lot. There's only one thing you can control in this whole process. It's what you create. You can't control what anybody says about it. You can't control how they react to it. You can't, and believe me, not everybody's gonna love it. You're gonna get criticism. That's just part of it. But the only thing you can control is what you put on the paper. And that's the freest space you have. That's the most free you are in this process, is the creation. And if you're resisting, we're talking with Manoli, I mentioned that, if you're resisting, you're I don't want to do this, I don't want to write that, then you're kind of blocking certain energies. So just go all out, you're free, nobody's going to read it, and then worry about the rest of it later. And free writing helps a lot with that. If you just write, you do okay, I'm gonna just free write for 30 minutes, just write whatever comes to my mind at the time. That helps in terms of locking it in. And there's a woman who has a book called The Morning Pages, I think Julia Cameron. I used to do that a lot. I used to just as soon as I wake up in the morning, rather than grab my phone, I just do maybe 30 minutes of free writing, because you still have some, beautiful things that you could just put on the paper from the night there. So that might be a good exercise to do, some free writing really early in the morning.
Awesome, thank you.
Awesome, thanks. I'm definitely going to try that.
Yeah, once you get in the phone, you're lost, man. It's
That's right, absolutely.
Yeah.
Very true.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay, so I have a few questions from the chat room. So you say you have about 10 more minutes, is that right?
Yeah.
Okay, all right. So let's see if we could do a few questions from the chat room. Okay, I have a question for this is from Junior. I have a question for Ms. Danticat. As a reader, I've become so frustrated that most of the books I've read for school growing up in Haiti were from France. As an adult, most of the books I read in my political studies at the Haiti State University were from Europe and North America. I feel like Haiti and Africa, our concerns and burdens are not taken that much into account. How can Black, brown people whose great-grandparents were enslaved, how can we overcome that?
All right, so I would love, Bayyinah, do you want to tackle the Haiti institutional, and I'll add, but I would love for you to address that one. And
Okay, with pleasure. Well, number one, we have to understand it's worthless to be angry. We have to know and we have to understand. How did they create a school system in Haiti? 1860, the Vatican came and imposed a concordat, an agreement. And Article 12 of this agreement says, the church has monopoly over learning, public school in Haiti. Monopoly. That means President Jeffra and his team signed a paper that said actually that the government of Haiti has no right to determine what happens with the minds of our children in school. We pay for the school, we give the buildings, we get into that, we do everything, but they decide what happened. So that's where your system started. So through and through, the church has put together a school system where we beat the French in 1804, but starting 1860, the French are gonna get into the minds of our children and beat us there. That's how Haiti's independence is gonna be snatched away from Haiti. Because as we go to school, we become French people who value French language and know all about the Eiffel Tower and everything else in France. We know all about Molière, Voltaire, and the other ones. Don't know nothing about no French writer. We have nothing about nothing about Haitian writers, Haitian literature, Haitian history. In fact, today, the degradation has continued to the point where if you were to go to Port-au-Prince today, in all these hundreds of universities, private universities, I would pay anyone who can find 2 schools where they teach Haitian history. And find me 1 school where you can do a license in Haitian history. If I want to do a master's in Haitian history, I must go to Jamaica, to the University of West Indies. If I want to do a PhD in Haitian history, I must go to St. Lucia or to Trinidad, to the University of West Indies. But in Haiti, there is nowhere I could do anything in Haitian history. So if a structure remove your vertebrae, that's what your history is. That's your vertebrae. This is the thing that keeps you standing up high with dignity. So they remove that. And then if we talk about, you mentioned Jacques-Stéphane Alexis, you mentioned so many different Haitian authors a few minutes ago, but most of our children would be lost. They would ask you, who's that? With very few exceptions. So we do not have our literature, we do not have our history. We're there every day of the week, we're celebrating some Jesus, some God, some saints that has nothing to do with us. A lot of the fortresses in Haiti today are named, like for example, in Fort Liberté, at the fort there, it's called Fort Saint-Joseph. What did Saint-Joseph have to do with anything? Nothing. So when you go through this kind of a structure, you don't know who you are. You are lost inside yourself and inside your country. The independence has been picked through the school system, bit by bit, has been removed with no war. We beat them in Crête-à-Pierrot, we beat them in Vertières, but we go to Saint Louis Gonzague and they snatched up. Then we go to Martin, Saint Martin, or whatever schools, and then we move what made you Haitian. So if you understand that's what it is, then you also can see how to rebuild, how to repair yourself. You have to decide aggressively that you want to read Haitian authors. You have people like Parnell Mark, you have people like Pompilis, you have all kinds of geniuses. Parnell Mark was a Haitian man who spoke 16 languages and had a PhD in mathematics and a PhD in astronomics in the 40s, okay? But we don't know about him. We don't know about all the great Haitian men, Haitian women who built and constructed and left a lot of things to us. And today, that's one of the reasons I started with freedom. Because here we were, excuse me, 5,000 years ago, we were debating on freedom. And today, if we sit down in a circle of so-called intellectuals in Haiti, and we're still gonna talk about freedom, somebody's gonna tell me, yeah, the French, Molière said, Voltaire said, have to clean up. You can do it. You have the freedom within you to decide from this day on, you want to read your own authors, you want to read African people, you want to read people that are like you, that have same experience, that is part members of our family. If you start to do this, then you will find yourself becoming a free person again. Know yourself, and that truth shall make you free.
And Bayyinah, do you think, what role do you think Creole plays in that, in all this? Like
Here we have to create the country. Before even going through the revolution, we created 3 master tools. Without those tools, there was no possible victorious revolution. Number 1, you created your cosmogony of Verdun. That is our vision of the cosmos. In Verdun, we have explained here's how we view the cosmos. Here's what the sun represents. Here's what this constellation, this is what it means. When we talk about Simbiganga, we're talking about Jupiter. We're talking about this planet, that planet. Here's how we view them. Here's their roles in our lives. So that's what Verdun is all about. So A, we created our worldview, our cosmic view. B, we created a language so we can share the information. When Aishan is singing, La reine soleil levé, oh, bon Dieu voit l'aller. La reine soleil levé, oh, bon Dieu voit l'aller. Timoun li a crié, oh, bon Dieu voit l'aller. Le la pli tombe, n'a planté pois. Oui, n'a planté pois. What are we saying? We sing it. But do us, so-called intellectual, think, what do we want? We've been singing this for 200, 300 years. What does it mean? That's where you begin to reflect upon your own words. Number 1, La Reine Soleil. So it's telling us sun is a feminine entity. They didn't say le roi soleil. They said La Reine Soleil. So soleil is a feminine entity in our worldview. We have to understand this. And then it goes on, and it's going to show us how there's always balance. Since we talked about Soleil, we're going to bring her sister, La Pluie. And we're going to show that children will be crying if Soleil was always there. But when La Pluie comes, sunlight plus water, there's going to be plenty of food. Everybody's going to be happy because there is balance. I say, that's nature. That's telling us, I say, in this song. Okay? Because God said, okay, son, stop now. You let the other one in. Okay? So we have all these songs. We didn't write books many times, way back then. In slavery time, we didn't have no paper and no pencil, but we didn't stop working. The creativity was there. And everything we wanted our children to know, we put it in song. And if you say, yes, I have a doctorate, I have a PhD, I have a blah, 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 I have this, I have that, that's great. But what do you do with what your great-grandparents left for you? That's when am I a you, when you en bal yo gan ki gen l'État. L'État minizaka nan point justice. Rete mon ti chaise pou m'chita pou m'gade yo. Rete mon ti chaise pou m'chita pou m'gade yo. Peye pou yo, ya fe sa yo vle. This song is telling us, after Leogan, there is a place where the state, the government sits. There is government, but there is no justice. If there is no justice, I don't need to be there. Lend me a little chair. Let me sit down and look at them and see how they're going to create a country with no justice. This is what we have received, telling us There is no government if there is no justice. It's a fact.
Mhm.
You don't have to go to anybody's school. Take your little songs and them, and you will become a genius just with that. So trust yourself. Give yourself the freedom to study your own people. Every dictum, everything that is said has a meaning. Try to figure it out. Don't just repeat words. Take the word, break it down, ask somebody, what do you think? You know, why do they say, oh, m'bral dégager m'kou met Jean-Jacques? Ah, pas inquiéto, Edwidge. Ou besoin me régler ça pour, m'bral dégager m'kou met Jean-Jacques pour me faire ça pour. What does that mean? I'm going to do just like Master Jean-Jacques to get this done for you. When you say this, which Jean-Jacques are you talking about? There's only one Jean-Jacques, Jean-Jacques Dessalines. He promised independence and he gave it. So when I promise Edwidge that I'm going to take care of this for her, and I tell her I will do just like Dessalines did, she knows I'll be taking care of business for real. All proverbs have meaning. All proverbs have historical roots. Analyze them. Don't just repeat them.
Yeah. And I think that's
me, la famille c'est voisin.
I think she's frozen.
No, I think
you were speaking on me.
Oh, okay. I think I thought you were frozen. But I was going to say, I think the power of this is that, going back to the gentleman's question, is that was even, it's like a balance of both kinds of knowledge, in which one does not diminish the other, right? Like getting book knowledge doesn't mean, as it's been framed often, freedom from this other kind of knowledge. I think that's extremely powerful. And to have like those things, I think, because in diaspora, because I saw it like popping up on the chat, a lot of people were saying they don't know the song, right? And that the first song, La Reine Soleil Levé. And part of that is in diaspora, for example, we don't have those things simultaneously. And I've been as part of discussions, you know, like for example, at the Little Haiti Cultural Center, where people are saying, you know, they're not going to teach us this stuff at school. They're not going to teach us even the big historical stuff at school, Haitian history at school. So it's maybe like a parallel path in terms of, because like you have the book knowledge because you kind of need some of it to survive in migration and even at home, but also then you have this other knowledge that we don't allow to, you know, to slip away at the same time. And I want to know when your album is coming out.
Sorry, what did you say?
I said, I want to know when your album is coming out. You can sing. But konsa, no?
Oh, non. Pas haïtien pas kon chante, chérie. Nous tout kon chante. Ou poko essayer, mon kon chante tout.
Okay. Ah, okay. Nous mettre pour nous faire un choral avec tout le monde dans Zoom là.
Oui, prochaine fois on a pas organisé. All of us know how to sing. That's our worldview. There is no one who does not know how to sing. But many of us don't sing. Or sometimes the first time I know me, all my years outside of IT, I can't hold a tune. Cannot. I've always known that. Until I started visiting certain areas, and then tout le monde kon chante, chante petit, chante. Here I am.
I love it though as a form of communication. I love the way you were using it, like as a form of transmitting knowledge. I think that's very, because we've taken it as a kind of entertainment. I think that's really, it's powerful.
No, it's singing. If you look at people building in IT, you'll find all of them singing while doing the mortar, we're doing everything, sending things up and down, everybody's singing. You go to where they planting, everybody's singing. You go to the funeral, everybody sings. We sing for everything. That is our way of transmitting information. Carnival, Rara, anyone who does anything wrong during the year, get ready, because when Rara comes, they're gonna put your story out there in a song. Yes, yes. Bayyinah te vole cabrite. It will come out in the song.
Well, maybe that's
Bayyinah
how the
stole
justice.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that's why a lot of people have to watch what they do, because if you misbehave, it will come out during Lala time. They'll put your story out.
Yeah, the shamer.
In a song form.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I have about 10 minutes, friends, and I have to bail for something else. This was great. This was so wonderful. You're gonna have to, if we have a kind of closing, you're gonna have to close with a song.
Well, I could.
I'm requesting a song from Mommy Bye.
I could attest. When we went on our book tour, she sang almost at every stop.
Wow.
And everybody was like, "Wow, I didn't know you could sing." and I have her recorded.
Oh,
I remember one time in Florida, I had it playing throughout the restaurant.
Oh my goodness!
Her album, so we could have sold that, Ma. We got to put that on. We got to put that on.
Someone in Tampa is jealous that she didn't sing in Tampa.
Okay, we got to come back on our next musical tour.
Yeah.
Okay, all right, very good. So 10 more minutes. All right, so I'll get to one question I saw in the chat that I actually did want to ask. Well, there's like a million questions happening in the chat room. It was something about, it was from Toussaint. Toussaint, if you're still there, Toussaint, go ahead and unmute so you could ask a question. Oh, here it is. No, it wasn't the process of writing, not that one. It was something about voodoo in your stories and spirituality, how you use it in your stories, but I can't find it. There's too much going on here.
Well,
I'm still here.
I'll just address. I'll just say. Oh, go ahead.
Hello.
Okay. Yes. Hey, Toussaint. Hey, there you go, brother.
Hey, how are your friends?
I'm doing well.
How are you doing? How are you know? You have such a friend.
Toussaint, are you you did the comic book?
I did the comic book and did.
Yes. Oh, hi. Hello. How are you?
I am well.
We should make sure that Nadine gets your book for her boys.
Yes, I would love that, and I want to
tell the people a little bit about your book, just real quick.
Yes, Superhero Service. I met Friends 2 years ago when he came to Penn. He was doing a presentation for the Haitian Professional of Philadelphia. And we wrote this book, Superhero Service, a true story after the earthquake in Haiti. And there was a bunch of girls came together to raise funded for the earthquake. And I was so amazed to see a 9-year-old girl raise the most money than all the celebrities have combined that was supporting me. In a matter of 3 years, this girl was more than $5,000 just making beads, bracelets, necklace. It was so moving story. The father says something to me that was very important. I remember Frederick Douglass once says, who you give your money to is who you give your power to. And then the father of this girl told me that I want Katie to give her money to someone she can connect with. And that was it for me. And she did that. So I wrote the book about her. And at the end of the book, we do some service project. We will inspire people to go out to the community and some amazing good deed service. Now this book that was about the earthquake in Haiti, now it's a book that we're using to go to school to present Haiti in a different light. Now Haiti is serving them. And so for the look down on Haiti, but now Haiti is coming here telling you about There's a way you could fight bully. There's a way you could look at your superpower. Can you write? Can you sing? Can you code? You know, do you have a little word of encouragement? What is it you have in your toolbox that can be a superpower to change not just the world, want to change the community where you're in? Start with your family at home. That's where it needs to start. The problem we have is the problem with families. It's the problem with families. So go the family, so go society, so go the church, so go the world, so go the community. You start at home. So that's what Superhero Friends was about. So series, now we're working on 2 more books, and that's why I really want to ask you questions about your process. The next 2 books is really kicking my butt big time. And how do you really enjoy that process when you have that block in your head and the story can't come out? A lot of time, what's some of the tools that you use to really get you into that zone?
Well, I mean, I'll answer quickly before I get my song from my
Yes, and I want to
I
say,
want to get my song in. I want to get my song before I have to go. But I think it's the like discipline. You know, like you sit down, and it's not always going to be, especially in the kind of you're working with factual things, and so it's about organizing. It's about like, you know, just sometimes it's structure. But I think it's just to keep going at it, because this is also what people don't tell you about writing. There's so many, like I was just writing a story, and I had maybe 7 false starts, and you're gonna have false starts, and sometimes we want to just like to get it right away. But that's part of the freedom of it, the exploration, and there'll always be false starts. But I'm gonna, we'll stay in touch about that. I'd love to see more of the book, because that book was really, I think, creating stories. That's like, we started out talking about the next generation, for the next generation, and just about Haiti, about this Haitian American experience, and also from a whole range of experience, because we're not monolithic, certainly. And I think people assume that we're monolithic, but we're not monolithic. So there's whole range of experiences that it's powerful to say. But I'm going to take special privilege and ask for my song, and then I have to I have to bail out for something else. But I want to say to Franz and to Bayyinah, it was such an extraordinary pleasure, and I really was so happy to have this conversation. And I love always, I do it by YouTube to sit at your feet and learn Bayyinah. So this was wonderful to do it like across this, and hopefully we'll get to do it in person one of these other days on the other side of this thing, when we're both 100 again, I guess. And I've learned so much, and I thank you, and I thank everybody for taking part. So
yes, thank you for joining us today. So okay, Ma, I believe there's a request.
Well, when I'll be 20 something.
Let's hear that beautiful voice.
Wede mutishes mshita mungadeyo. Wede mutishes mshita peyo buyo ya fesayole. Have a wonderful week. Have a great time. Enjoy your lives. Most of all, work, work, work. Develop your freedom. Develop your freedom. Without your inner freedom, you cannot go anywhere. Without your inner freedom, you can't give yourself discipline. Without your inner freedom, you cannot master your environment. So you'll only be destroying as the ones that are doing now. They think they're masters. They're not. They're just destructors. A destructor is not a master. Power is the ability to do. So develop your freedom so you can build freedom for you and for your entire environment, for the bird, for the trees, for the entire environment. We have responsibility to bring freedom everywhere. That's who a Haitian is. all of America is free thanks to Haiti's contribution. When Greece was in famine, Haiti sent tons of coffee to the government so they would sell it and feed their people. When Belgium had trouble, Haiti sent for help. And at the Battle of Adwa, the 2 Haitian regiments went to help the Ethiopian. So that stopped Italy from becoming a new colony. You are great people. Assume your greatness. Assume your freedom. Assume your divinity. See you next week.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Thank you, everybody.
Great show.
Thank you, Edwidge. We love you. Can't wait.
We love you. Merci en pile.
Thank you. Bye.
Fais attention tout le monde. C'est mettre coquille corps.
Content, ouais, Edwidge.
Merci. Ça fait un bon bagage.
All right.
Thank you.
Bye.
Continuez de travailler. Great show.
All right. Kembela tout le monde.
Bon courage.
Votez-nous bien.
Merci, mon vélo. Merci, friends. Bye-bye. Have a great day.
Bye, everybody. Thanks again for logging on. Catch us on the next Bayyinah Friends.
Bye, my bello.
Love you.
Bye, Edwidge.
Look out for the report later on.
All right.
Take care, everybody.
Bénédiction, protection.
Merci un peu, mamie.
Merci.
Bye, Sparkle. Bye, Lion. Bye, Mama.
Passez une bonne journée.
All right, bye.
Bayyinah, I hope you can come to the UK soon.
How are you, Winnie? All right, take good care.